Just to bring you a couple of more lines that are coming into us now in the last few minutes, I wanted just to remind people of the top story, the top line from this story this evening, and that is that in the last hour or so, we've heard that Ukraine has accepted a US proposal for an initial 30-day ceasefire with Russia. It was a joint statement between the Ukrainians and the United States after hours of talks in Saudi Arabia. Washington has also agreed to restore intelligence sharing and security assistance, both of which it had taken from Ukraine previously. The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in a press conference that the ball is in the Russians' court and that he will take the offer to Moscow. We've also been hearing from the US President Donald Trump. He has said in the last hour or so that he hopes Russia will agree to a ceasefire plan drawn up by the American and Ukrainian officials, and that there will be a US meeting with Russia later on Tuesday or Wednesday. He was making these remarks to reporters, and he also said this, interestingly, given what happened on that fateful Friday in the Oval Office between him and Mr. Zelensky. He said, President Trump said that he would invite Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky back to the White House. Of course, remembering in our minds, etched in our minds, that clash between those two last month in the Oval Office when the two men pretty much argued in front of the cameras without signing that critical minerals deal with the United States, which now looks like it's very much back on the table. Well, as we see those pictures from that Oval Office meeting, let's bring in Michael Busiukiu, who is the Global Affairs Analyst and Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Michael, it's so good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on BBC News. And if I can ask you, first of all, for your reaction to this breakthrough in Jeddah.
Good to be with you. Well, pretty head-spinning developments, but I have to also say that, you know, in the good old days when America put its signature to an agreement, its word was as good as gold. But we now live in this crazy era where Mr. Trump could change his mind very quickly. You know, this is the same leader of the United States who said multiple times, not once, let's annex Canada. He has said Ukraine should be part of Russia. So we hope, of course, that this holds. We hope that America, and perhaps along with its allies, will act as strong, reliable security guarantors to this. I would not blame any Ukrainian whatsoever, Kira Rudik and others, who go to sleep tonight very fearful. And I say that because just 2 hours away from me, we had Russian missile strikes, at least one in Odessa Oblast, and drone strikes. And now, according to Ukrainian Telegram, more on the way. So that, to me, does not signal a genuine party that is genuine about peace.
OK, well, Michael, if I can ask you possibly to stay right where you are and come back to us in a moment, because I just want to update people on the latest lines on this story. We've heard in the last hour or so, as I mentioned earlier, that Washington and Ukraine have agreed a 30-day total ceasefire. This is predicated on this deal being accepted by Russia. President Trump has said that this deal will now be taken to the Russian side. If you want to read more about what is happening in this developing story, you can go to the BBC's website, where you can get the very latest information on this breaking news story on BBC News. Stay with us, though, here. I'm back in a few minutes. Just to reiterate that breaking news, in the last hour or so, the United States has said it's agreed with Ukraine to immediately lift its pause on intelligence sharing with Kyiv and resume security assistance. The announcement came after 8 hours of talks between senior American and Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia. Well, in a joint statement, Ukraine backed a US proposal for an immediate 30-day ceasefire, subject to the agreement of Russia. The US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, told journalists in Jeddah the ball was now in Russia's court.
It's a terrible war, a costly war, a bloody war, and his number one interest is ending this war once and for all. Today we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally thank, we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Well, just to add to the Secretary's comments, the Ukrainian delegation today made something very clear, that they share President Trump's vision for peace. They share his determination to end the fighting, to end the killing, to end the tragic kind of meat grinder of people and national treasure that's happening on the front in Ukraine. Number one. Number two, they made concrete steps and concrete proposals, not only accepting our proposal for a full ceasefire, which you can see the details of which are in our joint statement that we released together, but we also got into substantive details on how this war is going to permanently end, what type of guarantees they're going to have for their long-term security and prosperity, but also really looking at what it's going to take to finally end this, the horrific fighting.
That's Marco Rubio there, and Mike Waltz giving a statement in Jeddah not too long ago. Let's cross live now and speak to Michael Busiocchio, the Global Affairs Analyst and Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Michael, thanks for staying with us on BBC News. And I wanted to ask you this. We heard a lot in recent weeks about Donald Trump and what he expects from Ukraine, about the pressure that he's using to bend Kyiv, if you like, to the will of the United States. It now seems that it's time for Russia to step up in public and to show its intentions and have those tested.
Absolutely. It's time for them to step up and prove that they're a genuine partner for peace. But I can tell you in the past minutes, literally, that I've been with you, there are reports coming through from Ukrainian media channels in Odessa, where I'm usually based, that a cargo ship under the flag of Barbados has been struck by a Russian missile or drone. 12 crew on board, 4 killed, including 3 Syrians and 1 Ukrainians. Now, this is from Ukrainian media channels, but during wartime, they're known to hold back and only report what officials give them. So I'm taking this to be pretty reliable. And earlier, just before that, there were drones headed towards Odessa Oblast, more reportedly on the way. So you would have thought that by now, word would have filtered through to the Russians that they're expected to be visited by the Americans, put forward a ceasefire agreement, and honor it. But again, this does not sound to me like a party that is interested in a ceasefire, because to hit a foreign ship like that is a really, really big deal. It's not the first one, but it's the first time, as far as I know, that we've had deaths.
Thank you for that, Michael. Important to say that we haven't had verification of that here.
Correct.
On the BBC, but thanks for the information that you've given to us. We've heard, actually, Michael, in the last few minutes, Donald Trump saying that he thinks he will talk to Vladimir Putin this week, and he hopes to have a total ceasefire in the coming days. So, in a sense, I guess the idea is to take this deal to the Russians, to show them what the deal is about, and to get them to then agree to it. Given what you said about what's happened in the last few minutes, how likely do you think it is that we're going to see that? I mean, judging from what you've just said to me, you don't think it's very likely. What is it going to take, do you think, for it to become more likely?
Yeah, well, I think that if the Russians do agree to this, and it seems like the Americans are making all the right statements, in fact, wanting to bring Mr. Zelensky back to the White House, that they'll put a lot of pressure on the Russians. Now, they may very well agree, and they may use this as well as a pause to regroup. And as my friend and colleague, Ambassador Herbst, said a few moments ago, they can agree and not agree. And I'll add one more thing to the list that they could do, because this is very, very much part of the Russian playbook. And that would be, for example, to make a strike at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is in their occupied part of Ukraine. It's the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. and blame it on the Ukrainians and say, see, they broke the agreement, we have to go back to war. So there are little tricks like that, and then that they can pull. And then the other thing is, even if this does happen, I was part of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission in Ukraine 2014, 2015, and it is such a complicated task to monitor these things. I mean, we literally had trained eyes, trained observers going along the front line and measuring the widths of tank barrels to see if the warring sides were in compliance. These things take a lot of time to ramp up, and the details, the devil is in the details with these agreements, is who agrees to what, how is it monitored. So a lot of road still to travel, but again, I'm sure many of my friends and contacts in Ukraine will want to put faith in this agreement because it's gone on for far too long in terms of deaths and destructions and displacement, of course, of millions of people.
Michael, it's been good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us on BBC News.
Thank you.
Let's bring you some more reaction that's coming into us on this breakthrough between the US and Ukraine. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has issued a statement. He said this: "I warmly welcome the agreement today in Jeddah and congratulate President Trump and President Zelensky for this remarkable breakthrough. This is an important moment for peace in Ukraine, and we now all need to redouble our efforts to get to a lasting and secure peace as soon as possible. As both American and Ukrainian delegations have said, the ball is now in the Russian court. Russia must now agree to a ceasefire and an end to the fighting too. I'll be convening leaders this Saturday to discuss the next steps. We are ready to help bring an end to this war in a just and permanent way that allows Ukraine to enjoy its freedoms." That the latest from Sir Keir Starmer in the last few minutes. And we're just getting a couple of more lines from the White House, actually, that I want to bring you before we move on. And this from one of our reporters from the White House, who's bringing us some more comments from President Trump. In the last few minutes, President Trump has said this: Ukraine ceasefire, he said, just agreed a little while ago. Ukraine has agreed to it. And he added, hopefully President Putin will agree to that also. He added that there's a very big difference in the current situation when compared to the day Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was last seen at the White House. And he also said to reporters, very interestingly, that he'll be open to inviting President Zelensky back to the White House after today's talks with Ukraine in Saudi Arabia. Now, remember, less than a fortnight ago, President Zelensky faced that extraordinary meeting in front of the world's media with President Trump and his Vice President J.D. Vance, literally demanding in front of the global media more gratitude for years of US support. And that meeting did not go well at all. Let's bring you a couple of more bits of reaction. In the last second or so, we've had some reaction from the European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. And she said this: "We welcome today's news from Jeddah